Hey friends, and welcome to Advent Day 13. We are moving right along. We are at a little over the halfway point. So thank you guys for sticking with me. We have been moving through the Old Testament and we reached into Exodus last night. Today we are going to talk about one of my favorite stories in Exodus, one that also makes me chuckle a little bit, and it's a lot about deflecting blame. So we're going to talk about Aaron and Moses and the 10 Commandments and that whole famous moment there. So if you will turn in your Bibles, if you want to follow along with me, I am starting in Exodus 32. That's where we're going to be. And I want to kind of preface what has happened here. So God's people, I've talked about, they've been traveling through the desert. Basically, he is using the 40 years where they travel through the desert to shape a nation that will be set apart to serve God, but ultimately a nation through which he would send the Messiah to save everybody, not just Israel, but all people would be reconciled to God. Now, you can imagine the problems that would arise having a large number of people traveling in a wilderness. There are rules and laws that would have to be laid down to make them function as a society. Otherwise, you would have people murdering one another, taking each other's wives. Lawlessness would just run amok. So, near the beginning of the experience, God calls Moses up to a mountain, and there he's going to give him specific instructions for everything, how they are to worship God in the wilderness, how they are to make sacrifices, what the priests are supposed to do, and then ultimately he gives Moses the 10 Commandments. So while Moses is up on this mountain, it takes a while. He's up there for quite a while. The people down below, Aaron's kind of left in charge, and they get really restless and they start to grumble again. Notice a pattern here. It just seems to always come about that eventually, no matter how many miracles God's working, these people start to turn away. And I think God just knows how fickle our hearts can be and how constantly we need to be reminded and pulled back to his love and step into obedience. So this story is a really good reminder of that. So I'm going to pick up in verse, this is chapter 32 in Exodus, and let's pick up let's go back to just the very beginning, okay? This is the story of the golden calf. So it says, when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses," I love that, right? They know him very well. He's been leading them, guiding them, but they act in this moment like they don't know him. "As for this fellow Moses," like we've forgotten about him. They said, "As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt," okay, they acknowledge he did that with God's help. "We don't know what has happened to him." So now, because Moses has been up on the mountain a while talking to God, they're saying, "I don't know if God's still with us. We don't know what's happened to him." They're just completely losing direction. It's amazing, without the right leadership, how fast people can stray and lose direction. So it goes on. Aaron answered them. Aaron's the one kind of in charge in the meantime. Here's the key. He could have said, "Have faith. He'll be back. God's doing some great things up on that mountain. Calm yourselves down. Let's talk sense." But no, he does something to appease the people. He says, "Take off your gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing and bring them to me." Now, why do they have all this gold? Well, if you remember, when they left Egypt, God told them to basically plunder the Egyptians. God said, "I'm going to make the Egyptians obey and give you everything, all of the wealth. So ask them for it." And so they took everything they could. Why did he ask them to do that? Did he just want to make his people rich? Not necessarily. So what Moses is up on the mountain doing right now is finding out instructions for this place that they're going to worship God, this tent that will be moved in the wilderness where God's presence will come to dwell. And this tent, oh my goodness, guys, I could do a whole nother series on this, and I absolutely will if you all are interested. is a complete mirror of what it is like in heaven. It is so cool the more you dive into how God gave instructions for his place of presence and worship. But he needs the gold, or he wants his people to use the gold to make the things that will go in this place. The altars, the bowls of incense, the lampstands, parts of the priestly outfits, all of that plunder was supposed to be used for all of this stuff to worship him. Now, see what Aaron asked the people to do with it. He says, take off those gold earrings, take off all that stuff you're still wearing, and he says, bring them to me. He's stepping in here, but not in any way or direction that God has asked him to. So all the people took off their earrings and they brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and he made it into an idol. Oh my goodness. Do they never learn? Do they never learn? You've got to think, like, these people are so silly. But how much are we like this? How many times has God come through with something amazing in our lives or answered prayer, and how quickly do we forget? What is your area that you keep forgetting that God has delivered you in? What is the areas where we get spiritual amnesia and we just keep forgetting? So here they are making an idol. You think they should have learned. They cast it into the shape of a calf, which is like a cow, fashioning it with a tool. So this wasn't just like a generic thing. This took time and effort. Then they said, these are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. Oh my goodness, this is blasphemous to say the least. Now he's saying that this cow is the God that brought them up out of Egypt. How ridiculous is this? I cannot believe these words that were coming out of Aaron's mouth. All of these people just witnessed this God of power, this God that brought the plagues, this God that parted the Red Sea and crushed the Egyptians, the God that just made manna rain down from heaven and water spring from a rock to feed and nourish them. And here they are now saying that this cow is what did it all. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar, they keep going, in front of the calf and announced, tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord. So the next day, the people rose early, sacrificed burnt offerings, and presented fellowship offerings. Afterward, they sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry. Revelry is no good, okay? They're getting up to do all of that. Then the Lord said to Moses, God completely sees what was happening here. Even though he's doing these very important things and giving these instructions to Moses on the mountain, he says to Moses, go down, because your people whom you have brought up out of Egypt have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I have commanded them and made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. God sees all of it. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it and have said, these are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. All right, so let's kind of fast forward. God and Moses have this conversation. All of this terrible stuff is happening. And now Moses comes down the mountain. Talk about like an angry father, right? In many ways, he feels compassion for these people like they're his children. He has interceded on their behalf for God to just not let his anger burn against them. And it says, let me back up. Verse 15, this is Exodus chapter 32, verse 15. Moses turned and went down the mountain with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands. What is the testimony? Well, it's the 10 Commandments. These are those tablets that God wrote them on. They were inscribed on both sides, front and back. The tablets were the work of God. The writing was the writing of God engraved on the tablets. When Joshua heard the noise of the people shouting, he said to Moses, there is the sound of war in the camp. Oh goodness, now he's not taking responsibility. What's the sounds coming from the camp, Moses? It sounds like war. Okay, clearly Moses has come to confront. He's going to confront Aaron, who was left in charge. Moses replied, it is not the sound of victory. It is not the sound of defeat. It is the sound of singing I hear. He's like, I don't hear war sounds. People are singing. Trust me, this is not a Grinch story where they're here singing down in Whoville. This is not a good thing. When Moses approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, his anger burned, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them to pieces at the foot of the mountain. This is proper anger here. And he took the calf they had made and burned it in the fire. Then he ground it to a powder, scattered it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it. Whew, there's some punishment that's going to happen here. He said to Aaron, "What did these people do to you that you led them to such a great sin?" Now we come back to Aaron, right? This is a great lesson in deflecting blame and how wrong it is, and how we need to step up and we need to take responsibility for our actions, because the sin repercussions of somebody not taking responsibility can impact so many, an entire people in this case. So he said, what did they do to you? You know, Moses is expecting an answer like, did they torture you? Did they hold you down and force you to do this? Remember, none of that happened. Really, this was Aaron's idea. He says, "Do not be angry, my lord," Aaron answered. Now he's trying to make some excuses. "You know how prone these people are to evil. They said to me, 'Make us gods who will go before us.'" Did they really say that? Or was he kind of leading into that? "As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him. So I told them, 'Whoever has any gold jewelry, take it off.' They gave me the gold, I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf." I just absolutely find this line hilarious. I threw the jewelry into the fire, and out of the fire came a calf. As if he had no part in shaping this idol, as if a calf literally sprung out of the fire, out of the melted gold. Okay, this is the equivalent to me catching my toddler, drawing on the wall in markers, and I'm like, "Okay, who did this? This is not okay." And the toddler going, I don't know. There's a marker on the floor here, and all of a sudden, out of the marker came this drawing all over the wall. I don't know what happened in between those two. I didn't do it. Okay, he's trying to deflect because he knows he has done a great wrong here. So of course there has to be some serious consequences, because this is the moment of real truth, really, of how is God's nation going to be going forward? Are they going to continue and be allowed to be idolatrous like this and do whatever they want? Because that will not suit God's purposes. Cannot happen. So it goes down. Moses saw the people were running wild, and that Aaron had let them get out of control and so become a laughing stock to their enemies. That's the other thing. God's name was famous now because of what had happened in Egypt. All the enemies were looking at this people and wondering what God would do next. This was a pivotal moment. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." And all the Levites rallied to him. And basically, they're going to go through the camp and strike down whoever's not for the Lord. The consequence of the sin here is death. The people that could not follow God would not. They give them a choice here. They say, "Whoever's still for the Lord, come with me." Everybody else, they get struck down. They die right here on the desert floor. And this is the beginning of teaching us just how serious sin is, just how serious it is to let your heart turn away from God. And you know, we don't have golden calves as idols today. Maybe in some countries they do. But here in America, our idols are very different. An idol is something we bow down to that fills our hearts and our minds above God. You know something we bow down to a lot? Our phones. Have you ever thought about that? How many times a day we lower our head and bow down to what is on our phones, on our social media, on our accounts? Be mindful of what you pour into your heart and your head, because what you are shaping there can become an idol. And the consequence of turning away from God is death. Now, many of us can face a spiritual death. These people faced a physical death. But the good news is, and we are almost there through our Advent series, Jesus is coming. He's coming. He came into that world as a baby to free all of us from the consequences that our sin can bring. So that's it for today. Absolutely go take a look at this story. I just find Aaron's response hilarious. I threw it into the fire and out came this calf. So take a read of all of that in Exodus, if you will, and just enjoy learning a little bit about the history of God's people. Thank you guys for joining me. I'm Morgan on Life and Lilacs. I will be back tomorrow for Advent Day 14, and we have some special new topics coming in the last few days as we get ready and closer to Christmas. So I can't wait to see you soon.